Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to In the Feed Zone. My name is Jason Flores, and I'm here to present to you one of the articles that we are going to bring up this week for the Feed Zone. A quick medical disclaimer before we get started that the only purpose of this live stream is to educate and to inform and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. Its live stream is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. The other goals of the live stream here are just to present a current article in the media covering food, hydration, and how it relates to endurance sports, and to open a dialogue for viewers to ask questions and get advice and to talk about their experiences. So today we have a pretty interesting topic. We're actually going to talk about how to eat and drink for cold weather workouts. The article is brought to us by a CTS expert coach named Reed Baloney. He's got really good information. He's out of North Carolina Training Center. He's got a master's degree in exercise science, as well as a coach from the CTS group. So this group was actually posted, and so if you would like to check out a link, you can check out a link. I will include it here at the end, and of course on the chat here as well. And if you have any questions, definitely go ahead and post up. So the questions are, and kind of how we start this conversation is how to eat and drink for cold weather workouts. A lot of us, if we can get out, I know if weather can get very difficult this time of year. Fortunately, where I'm at, it's not too bad, but definitely I have athletes that do kind of brave the weather for a lot of their workouts and still enjoy getting out as long as it's not too crazy out there. So during this time of the year, obviously the temperatures can drop. We've given some, we've talked about different things and opportunities that we have, like on Zwift, and getting all those workouts on Zwift could be useful, but definitely could take a toll on the mental side of things. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. So getting yourself out for a good outdoor ride, once or twice a week can definitely, help yourself if you're able to kind of get that breakaway, or if the weather outside is available. So just going through that, we can share some tips that we found, and we found really kind of useful as we go, and we're going to kind of break it down into 3 different parts, essentially before your ride, during your ride, and after your ride. And we'll kind of talk about some tips. I've got a couple slides here that can help from the article, some good resources here. So we'll start with before your ride. And a lot of us, you may be using a mixed drink with some hydration and that sort of thing, or you may just be using just plain water. And so with that, we just need to be careful, because if you are just using water, these things can actually freeze depending on the weather outside, and it doesn't need to be completely freezing outside just because of the wind chill and the wind coming past the bottles. So adding drink mix in this situation could be helpful if things are getting close to that freezing point, about 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So definitely be careful about that. So be careful. I know I was listening to a podcast talking about a similar situation, and they were doing an interview with one of the pros on the podcast, and they were talking about putting a little bit, as much as a teaspoon or a tablespoon of actual whiskey or alcohol, because of the freezing point being much lower for alcohol. So not condoning us putting shots of alcohol in our hydration drinks, but just a fun little antidote of what other riders do to make sure their bottles don't get frozen over the winter seasons here. So we don't want to all end up alcoholics after the winter off season here. So definitely fun. The other thing is to think about is to combine nutrition and hydration in the cold weather. So normally we talk about doing hydration and getting a good balance of electrolytes and water so that your body can absorb that hydration in your bottles, and carrying your food in your pocket. So with the weather, it can definitely be very difficult and cumbersome to be able to reach back and go ahead and reach some of that food. So with that, you may want to consider a different type of mix that may work for you as well. Something that has a little bit more carbohydrates in the bottle, so you just need to worry about getting more of those nutrients in during that part of the hydration. So you get both hydration and the fueling from your bottle, or at least just a little bit more. So choosing a drink mix that might have more carbohydrates during this winter season. But also too, during the winter time, you are going to have a higher expenditure of energy, or you're going to be spending more calories and energy to be able to fuel your ride because of the weather and trying to warm the core and warm the body up. So we need to make sure that we are getting those extra carbohydrates in during those workouts. So I'm keeping that in mind, and maybe considering a drink mix that might have more carbohydrates in the bottle could be useful and could be helpful. The other topic the article brought up was to splurge for insulated bottles, and we've seen these in the summer months. We use them to keep the water or the hydration nice and cool, but it can also insulate to keep it from freezing for about 2 hours. So it actually works on both ends. So having a set of bottles that you use for these colder rides out could be really useful too, keeping things nice and fluid essentially, and as well as something like wearing a hydration pack during this time of the season could also help, just because it's closer to your body, and it will use some of the heat to make sure that it doesn't freeze over, and it's also protected from the wind because it would be on your back. The one caveat with this would be to make sure that you are also insulating the tube that you drink out of, and then just making sure you can do that. There are also some other things that you can do to make sure that your bottles don't freeze over, or some tactics, but we'll talk about those when we talk about during the ride. I'll bring that back and come around. The last tip or last thing for before your ride, as you prepare and kind of make sure you have all your ducks in a row, is incorporating more variety foods in your ride. So this winter time is a good time to make your own bars, to try a new food, something that works for you, just to see what can be beneficial or can be useful for you, whether it be something more processed like a bar packaged, or something that you make could be useful during this time to kind of try and see if it works well, so that you can carry it on to your season. So something to always remember to kind of use if you can, trying different things, so that you know that you're not always tied into this one bar and this certain amount of flavors, and that's all that you're able to have during your workout and training. Okay, so we'll jump over to kind of our next part, which will be during your ride. So there's a couple points here: accessibility and when to stop on longer and shorter rides. And so what we'll start off with is kind of accessibility, and this means where you're going to have the food. And we talked a little bit about this in the last topic, just about making sure or considering maybe having more carbohydrate in your drinks. But one of the common mistakes is that obviously food in your pockets can be really difficult if you've got your gloves on and that sort of thing. So one thing that you could do is take those bars and even for a lot longer rides, what I'll do or have athletes do is I'll have them cut the tops off of it so it's easy to slide out. But you could even go one step further. You could take the bar out, cut it up into bite-sized pieces, and then put it back into its container or its little sleeve, and then put that in your pocket or somewhere that's much more easily accessible, but something where you don't have to open them up, find the piece, and that sort of thing could be much more useful or easy to get to, rather than having to do it from essentially from scratch. So making sure that the food is accessible and that you're able to get to it. And then we talk about the length of your rides. If you're going for a short ride, this isn't a time for a coffee stroll and stopping here and there and that sort of thing. So what you're going to be looking to doing is, if you're only going out for anywhere from 60 to 120 minutes, 1 to 2 hours, it's best to just power through, get through the whole ride, done with the food and drinks when you start, meaning you would fuel before the ride, and then that way you can just go through the whole ride, get your work done, and come on back. So this may mean you have an extra bottle, and you're doing all those things on board, so that you're not having to put food in your mouth or having to deal with packaging and that sort of thing. So maybe just doing an extra bottle with more carbohydrates could be your strategy on shorter rides. But for longer rides, I think it's important that we kind of plan those out just like we normally would, but making sure you have some stops where you could refill the bottles. So one tactic that I've kind of used or have heard of riders use is that you carry, let's say you have a total of 3 bottles, you've got 2 in the bike, you carry an empty bottle in your back pocket. So that way, when you get to a stop, 2 hours later, you can actually you could fill that bottle that doesn't have any fluid in, so it doesn't have any chance of freezing over, with more water, and that way it is, room temperature, or wherever you're at, convenience store, that sort of thing. It's that temperature. For God forbid the other two get frozen or something like that, then you have that available, or if there's an empty bottle, you can kind of rotate them through. And you've just got one bottle that's kind of, ambient temperature that you can fill up, and it doesn't have frozen fluid in it, if in fact it is. But having that extra bottle can be definitely very useful. So just knowing a couple places where you can find and seek shelter to either warm up or to get more fluid is important. And so if you're getting to a store, you're stopping, is just try to be quick. Go in, get what you need, get out, because obviously it's going to be a little bit warmer wherever you're going into, and you may not want to get out after that at all. So just a quick top. The other thing is that you don't want to run into a situation where you're in the middle of a long ride, long enough that you stop, and you end up stopping, not generating any heat anymore. Because what you want to do is make sure that you're keeping that body nice and warm, and that body's continue to move. And on the bike, obviously, you're going to create heat. But if you start to dry off and you're starting to cool off, your body will not be generating this heat, and you're actually going to get cold. You're essentially going to have a bunch of cold clothes on, riding through the cold wind, and your body not making any heat to kind of starve that off, and essentially it will leave you cold for the rest of the ride home. So really important to kind of keep that in mind. So long rides, plan them out, make the stops quick. If you are going to stop, plan with the extra bottle, the bottle that's not frozen, and it's got an ability to kind of put more fluid in, and just making sure that the food is easily accessible for yourself to be able to use. So really great tips there. So then we get to when you get home, and the things that you can do to kind of make it easier as you come off the ride, and get yourself acclimated back to ambient temperature or indoor temperature. One of the things that it brings up, and I think is a really good point, is if it's cold, it's wet outside, throw the bike up against the wall, put it on a stand, and go ahead and rinse it off really quick. You're wet, the bike's wet, just get it done. Wipe the bike down really quick, get that chore just done with. If the bike's all dirty, you can rinse yourself off, rinse the bike off, and then go from there. And one really good tip it brought up was warm up slowly. And a lot of times people just go inside, they jump in the shower, and you're under the hot water, and you'll get a whole lot of issues with tingling and kind of that weird pins and needles feeling. If you've had that before, kind of like even when like your arm kind of falls asleep, because your body and all the blood vessels have kind of constricted the vessels when they're outside to kind of restrict the blood flow. And when you come in, or if you warm yourself up too quickly, everything opens up, and you're going to kind of feel that in the nervous system. So toes and fingers could be numb from a cold ride. Just don't jump into the hot shower. It can definitely be very painful. So just slowly defrost, take your clothes off, change into warmer clothes, and give yourself to kind of eat and drink for recovery, essentially. And that's the next tip here, is to grab a recovery drink or a meal, a mug of your favorite warm beverage, and kind of give yourself a chance to kind of warm yourself from the inside out in a slower manner, so that way your body can kind of acclimate a little bit easier. So this extra time outdoors, people feel like, if you do go outside, if it's cold, if it's damp, it is going to kind of get you sick, but there isn't any compelling evidence that actually spending time outside in cold or damp weather is actually going to get you sick. What it tends to be is that it's more likely that the time that we spend more indoors during that time with people who are also spending time indoors increases our susceptibility to getting sick. So making sure you have good recovery during your hard training sessions, getting good rest, and having lots of fresh fruits, vegetables, water, hydration, all the things that we talk about here in the feed zone to make sure that you're getting taken care of, allows you to keep a strong immune system all through the season, but it's specifically during this winter season. And we've had a couple talks. You can go back to the feed zone and we talked about the immune system and how to keep that strong. So really, we shouldn't let gloomy weather, wet weather, cold weather be an excuse for not doing and going out to do what we love. So get outside, take these tips, go back, listen back to this podcast, and it'll definitely help you get a better experience outside because you've planned for it. Just like we plan for everything else with our training, with our structured work, with our workouts. Use that time, use this information as a tool to be able to arm yourself with that information to be able to have a good time out there. All right, so in the feed zone, if you've noticed, this has changed a little bit. Before it was kind of a live ride. We moved the format a little bit to more of a recorded show to allow a little bit more headroom to be able to play this at different time zones. So I hope that you guys are able to enjoy this at different times and are able to view it. And let us know if the time is not working, if we could replay it at a different time, we could also do that. So hope you've enjoyed today in the feed zone. We've got a little bit more information kind of about how to eat and drink for cold weather workouts. And if you have any questions, definitely let us know. But if not, we will see everyone next week in the feed zone. If you have any articles that you feel like you would like us to cover or like more information on, or would like to share with the group, definitely post up on the Team ODZ Facebook, and I can definitely catch it on that end. My handle is Jason Flores on the Team ODZ site. Just tag me in the article and say, hey, what do you guys think? You think we can cover this for in the feed zone? I'd love to see that as well. All right, with that, I will see everyone next week in the feed zone.